This video is going to cover psf-bch-api. This is a REST API server for accessing the Bitcoin Cash blockchain, as well as SLP tokens on the Bitcoin Cash blockchain. This video is going to cover how to install the Docker container for this software. More specifically, I'm going to dive into the config settings because there's quite a few of them, explain what they mean, starting with a high-level overview of how this software fits into the rest of the cache stack. And then I'm going to go through building the Docker container, and then finally show how to do end-to-end testing to make sure that your installation is running correctly. So let's start with config settings, or let's start with the repository. psf-bch-api under the Permissionless Software Foundation group on GitHub. This picture, I want to dwell on this picture for a moment that's in the README of the repository. So the full node is at the bottom. That's the base layer. That's the software that actually does transactions, has direct access to the blockchain. And then the next layer up, and I want to switch between this picture and the picture in the introduction on the Cache Stack website, documentation website, that shows this OSI type diagram of the stack of software. And so you have the full node is, you can think of these like stories in a building. The full node is the base layer, and then there you have the indexer layer, which for us is the Fulcrum indexer and the SLP token layer. And then finally, psf-bch-api. This software, this provides a Web2 API that normal web developers can access, and through it, access all of the blockchain infrastructure below it, having a single point of reference. And so it's the heart of the cache stack. This is the most important piece of software. So let's get into how to install it and how to configure it. If you scroll down in the README, it talks about this .env file. So let's start by cloning the repository. I'm logged into my cache box, and I'm just going to expand this here. I've got my full node running here, my Fulcrum indexer running in these two containers, and my SLP token indexer running in these three containers. I'm just going to show the log so you see what a well-running, fully synced system should look like. If I look at the full node logs, I can see progress is 1, and which means it's fully synced 100%, and the current block height. If I look at the Fulcrum mainnet logs, you'll see that it'll talk about a new block when it happens, and otherwise it'll regularly report this heartbeat of mempool transactions, and they'll go up until a block gets mined, and then they'll go back down. So that's what Fulcrum looks like when it's happy and fully synced. And then finally, if you look at the block indexer, you can see that it'll report a block when it comes in, and the rest of the time it'll just be regularly heartbeat reporting that's checking the ZMQ port. And so this is what it looks like when it's fully synced and happy. So you need to have all three pieces of this infrastructure synced and running before you install. So I'm logged in my cache box. I've got those three pieces of infrastructure running. I can clone this repository. And I can go to the production Docker folder, and there will be a .env example. And I want to copy that to .env, and we're going to take a look at that. Now, if you followed the other videos to set up the Docker containers for those other three pieces of infrastructure, this should just work. You shouldn't need to make any changes. We've got the full node, the 172.17.0.1, that is the Docker network on Linux. And so that's how this is all getting wired. So we've got the full node information here. We've got the Fulcrum REST API URL here. We've got the SLP indexer here. And if you go Docker PS, you can compare these ports to the ports in this listing here. So these are the config settings that are really important, that are connecting psf-bch-api to your Fulcrum indexer, your SLP token indexer, and your full node. And then finally, there are, this just sets the port, and there's this X402 enabled. I set this to false, as well as use basic auth. I set this to false by default. If you're running on the cache box running locally, you don't need to bother with these. These are for setting stuff up in the cloud. So like I said, it should just work. These are the bare environment variables that you need to set, and you can go in the README for a more detailed explanation of what each config setting is and does. And that should be all you need. From here, you just build it, Docker compose build. Once you've got that .m file copied over like we did. And then you can bring it up with Docker compose up-d. Let's see how it's looking. Okay, so it's up on port 5942. That looks pretty good. I'm going to log in to the cache box from a second terminal here. So this terminal on the left, I'm going to keep an eye on psf-bch-api. And this terminal on the right, I'm going to go clone bch-js, and we'll use that to run end-to-end tests. So here, bch-js is pinned. And so let me clone that. Yeah, and that brings us to the last bullet point. So I'm running node 22. Oh no, node 20. That's fine. It should work either way. So I'm going to install the dependencies for bch-js. Okay, those npm dependencies are installed. So let's check it out. Okay, we've got psf-bch-api running on port 5942. And if we check the package.json file, you'll see that there is a script here called test integration local no auth. So it's going to test the local machine, in a no auth config setting, which is what we have. We turned the X402 off and we turned the authentication off. So we can run that script, and this is going to test. It's going to communicate with bch-api, just like in the graph here. Where's my graph? Right here. bch-js is going to talk to psf-bch-api, which is going to talk to these other three pieces of infrastructure. It's going to exercise all the endpoints. And so everything checked, everything passed, so everything's set up correctly. And this is what you should see. If, say, like the SLP indexer is not working correctly, or it's on a different port or something, you'll see a lot of the SLP tests fail. And so things like that. So you might have to do a little bit of debugging. If you do end up with issues like that, the best thing to do is to go to Telegram, to our bch-js toolkit Telegram channel, and then we have Ben, the AI, the helpful tech support AI, and you can trigger him with the -q, and Ben will come and help you, and you can debug with him. He's an AI chatbot that has a bunch of knowledge, who's been trained on all this software. So this is a place to come if you need help setting up psf-bch-api.